Let's dive right into this explainer and investigate one of the most profound yet quiet tragedies of our time, the structural demise of the American middle class. We hear about it in the news constantly, and we absolutely feel it in our wallets. But today, we are pulling back the curtain. Using official data from the Federal Reserve, the Census Bureau, and the Congressional Budget Office, we're going to uncover the hidden forces that are systematically dismantling the financial foundation of the United States.
We're starting off with a pretty brutal paradox. Think about it. If the US economy is growing and we're producing more than ever before, why does it feel so incredibly hard just to maintain a basic standard of living? For decades, the American dream relied on a really simple equation, right? Work hard, get ahead. But as you're going to see, the data shows that equation has fundamentally broken down.
And hey, this isn't just a political talking point. Federal Reserve leaders like Chair Powell and Governor Brainerd have explicitly warned that a strong middle class isn't just a nice-to-have feature. It's literally the absolute cornerstone of our economic demand and our democratic stability. When the middle class thrives, the whole economy thrives. But when everyday folks struggle to save and invest, the entire system faces a massive vulnerability. Now, this stark comparison is really the emotional heartbeat of our data. Look at this contrast. The generational promise of upward mobility, that deeply held idea that you will do better than your parents did, has basically fallen off a cliff. Back in the 1950s, over 80% of kids grew up to out-earn their parents. Today, it's basically a coin toss, hovering right around 50%. The escalator of upward mobility is grinding to a halt.
Part 1. The Great Wage Decoupling. Producing more, earning less. So what exactly broke that escalator? Well, our first major clue comes directly from the Census Bureau. In 2024, real median household income flatlined at exactly $83,730. That is zero statistical growth from pre-pandemic levels back in 2019. So despite years of relentless grinding economic activity, the typical household is essentially financially paralyzed.
And here is the smoking gun. If you look at the top row, from 1947 to 1973, productivity and compensation grew practically in lockstep. But then, scan down to 2025. You are producing vastly more out there, with productivity growing at 2.2%, but your real hourly compensation, it barely inches forward at 1.4%. That historical link has just been completely severed.
Because of this persistent gap over the decades, we've seen a dramatic drop in what economists call the labor share of income. In plain English, this is just a slice of the economic pie that actually goes to workers. As businesses shift investments toward automated technologies and software, those capital inputs are claiming the economic value that used to go directly into your pocket. So you're baking a much bigger pie, but taking home a much smaller slice.
Part 2. The cost of living squeeze.
Okay, so we know real wages are stagnating, but why doesn't the money you do make seem to stretch nearly as far at the grocery store? To understand this, we have to translate some macroeconomic jargon. Basically, thanks to technology, the price of the goods we produce at work often goes down, but the consumer price index, which measures the basic everyday needs you actually consume at home, keeps steadily rising. Simply put, your cost of living is fundamentally outpacing the market value of your labor.
And when those consumer prices surge, it is absolutely devastating for the middle class. For instance, persistent inflationary pressures push the CPI up 4.2% leading into mid-2026. This kind of relentless inflation acts like a hidden tax, eroding your purchasing power and totally wiping out any modest nominal wage gains you might have gotten. It's the economic equivalent of running on a treadmill that just keeps speeding up.
Part 3. The Housing Affordability Crisis. Seeing this timeline chronologically causes pure sticker shock. According to Federal Reserve data, the median home price in the U.S. has exploded from under $64,000 back in 1980 to a staggering $403,200 by 2026. Even when you account for inflation over those decades, the sheer velocity of this housing price inflation has dramatically outpaced typical household earnings. As Federal Reserve research points out, a house used to cost about 3 times the median household income back in 1988. But recently, that ratio surged past 4 times the median income. When housing costs decouple from local wages this severely, it actively blocks the primary pathway that regular families use to accumulate long-term wealth and build equity.
And the human impact of this data is just brutal. Middle-income homeownership has plummeted from its 2004 peak of 74% down to 68% by 2016. And it's even worse for minority groups. Black households saw entire decades of hard-fought progress completely wiped out following the Great Recession, dropping to just a 42% homeownership rate by 2018.
Part 4. The Wealth Inequality Gap.
So, if the middle class is losing its share of the economic pie, we have to ask the obvious question. Where is all that generated wealth actually going? Well, this reality check from the Congressional Budget Office shows us exactly where. Between 1979 and 2022, the top 1% share of post-tax income literally doubled to 14%. Over that exact same period, the core of the American middle class saw their share actively shrink.
It gets even more sobering when you look at how wealth recovers after economic shocks. Since the Great Recession, the top 10% of households grew their wealth by 19%. Meanwhile, middle and lower income families still face massive wealth shortfalls and haven't fully recovered to their pre-crisis levels. It's like the economic system is increasingly designed to reward those who already hold assets.
And here's the crucial point. We can't just blame this on pre-tax wages. Even after our progressive tax system does its job, taking a bigger share from higher earners and distributing credits to lower earners, the post-tax income gap between the top and the bottom still widened by 14% between 2009 and 2024. The structural concentration of wealth at the very top is just overpowering the tax code's ability to balance the scales.
Part 5. The systemic demise of the middle class.
When we step back and piece all these clues together, a pretty stark picture emerges. We are caught in a systemic loop. We've got a persistent gap where productivity outpaces compensation. We have cost of living shocks completely eroding any wage gains. We have unattainable asset prices locking families out of housing equity, and a relentless concentration of wealth at the very top. This systemic reality forces families to spend more just to survive, systematically destroying their ability to save, invest, and climb that economic ladder.
Ultimately, all of this data proves that the financial squeeze you might be feeling isn't a personal failing. It's a massive macroeconomic shift. As the Federal Reserve points out, our entire economic engine runs on middle-class consumer demand. So it leaves us with a huge question. How long can an economy realistically survive, let alone thrive, when its foundational middle class is structurally built to disappear? Thank you so much for joining this explainer. Keep questioning the data, and I'll see you next time.